About a day and a half had passed, I later found out. And so I'm laying in the hospital in the ER, and I was afraid to open my eyes. I knew I was awake, because you get that feeling that there's light coming in, right? But being a former Catholic, I thought I was in purgatory. I was like, because I knew something bad, ugly happened, recently. And I was afraid. I was afraid to see where I was. And then I heard the hospital helicopter. And I said, oh my God, I'm alive. I made it. And I was so excited that I was alive that I went to jump, and they have me laying on my stomach. And I went, I couldn't move. I grabbed it and I couldn't move. And I looked over and there was a nurse. And then of course there's the heart rate monitor going off. And she looked over at me, and I'm laying on my stomach. She goes, are you okay? How do you feel? I said, okay. And she said, are you hungry? Back then the question was, do you want to eat? Because that's a sign that, okay, maybe everything's good and no organs were hit. And I said, yes, I'm starving. So I ended up eating on my stomach. And, but anyway, so as the days went on, I had to, figure out what I was going to do. I made this commitment. So then I had to do something, because I felt like, something bad was going to happen if I did not. So I ended up, long story short, or cutting the story short, I ended up joining the Navy.
Can I interrupt you, Marty?
Yeah.
I just gotta tell you something about what you've been sharing with us. Your life story at that point of your life, in about a 10-minute period, you just shared how you went from a family that went through divorce, then you ended up in foster care that didn't work out, and then you went through a near-death experience and promised the Lord that you'd do something with your life if you were able to live. And so that's a little summary in 3 or 4 points of what you just finished talking about, I believe. But if we can, I want to go back for a second before you go too far, because as you go into the rest of your life, all of you that are listening, I want to tell you something. Marty is a real success that's come through life the hard way, as you can start to hear what he's talking about. And I want to let it sink in, because I think that many of you that are listening to Marty's story have the exact same story. You might not have got stabbed like him. You might have got shot or whatever, but divorce, hardship, foster care, whatever. I want to talk about that for a few minutes if we can. Is that okay, Marty?
Sure.
All right, good. So, but before we do that, Marty, when I knew you were coming on, I came up with some Bible verses. I like to share scripture to inspire people about overcoming. I pray and I meditate. And for you, I said, what is it that I want to share? What's the message that we're going to deliver? It's about overcoming adversity and hardship, and what are some of the pointers? I know that in a few minutes we're going to start getting into the solution. That's something that Marty said to me last night when we were talking, is that, hey, look, I want to tell my story, but I want to get to the solution. He wants to offer things that y'all should listen to about how he went from this type of a background to some really positive things that happened in his life. But so let me just read a couple verses here. This is from John 16:33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Romans 12:21. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Luke 1:37. For no word from God will ever fail. 1 Corinthians 15:57. But thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. 1 John 5:4. For everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. Oh, it just goes on. I got some more. Let me just share a few more, because I want to just sink in, because I'll tell you why. What Marty's going to start talking to us about is this world that we're talking about, the dark forces in the world. And we're going to get into something very, very deep in a minute, I promise you. But Marty has overcome, and he's going to share with you how he's overcome. Romans 8:37. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Psalm 3:3. But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. if you haven't started to figure out the direction I'm going here, it's when you are close to the Lord and have trust and faith in the Lord that your life's going to move in the right direction. Marty, why don't you speak? I'll read some more in a few minutes, but why don't you share some thoughts now before you go into the rest of your experience with the Navy? That's where we'll pick up in a few minutes.
Okay. So, going through this traumatic life near-death experience, unknown to me, and I obviously had anxiety. So I would go to bed, I'd wake up, the pillow would be soaking wet, and I knew I had a rough night of sleep. A lot of times I would be chasing the guy that stabbed me, or he would be chasing me, and you just have these nightmares because you experience that thing. So these memory loops keep cycling and keep you awake all night. And so I didn't know what I had. And so back in 2001, I lost my dad to MS, and my wife and I at the time were going through a divorce. So I was really in a little bit of a depression back then, and I went to a psychiatrist to get sleeping pills. And I gave him my history and told him my mom was bipolar. So automatically I'm bipolar, right? So that's what he thought, and that's what he prescribed me with. And so anyway, long story, cut this one short, I went from Abilify to Zoloft, you name it, and trying to, get a good night's sleep. And eventually I was at the VA. I used to go to the VA hospital for my hernia. And so I told them about my sleeping issues, and they set me up with a psychiatrist. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. And she said, "Do you have an hour?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "Okay, this is going to take some time." So, and she went back in my life story, and I told her everything like I'm kind of saying now, a lot of it. And she says, "Okay," at the end there, she goes, "You have what we call non-combat PTSD." And I was like, wow, that doesn't sound good. So then, of course, I went through a little regimen of pills, medications to sleep with my psychiatrist at that time. And then I guess after about 2 years of that, she goes, "How are you doing with the benzos?" She would call them the benzophiridine, whatever the name is. They're really nasty drugs. And she said, "We want to start weaning you off of them because it has a high mortality rate for people in their 50s. And I'm like, what? And so I was like, well, how do I do this? So anyway, I started learning how to meditate. I did a lot of reading on mindfulness, and at first I didn't believe it. I thought it was all hokey, and I started practicing, and just like anything else, weightlifting, you get better with practice. And so I was able to wean myself off the pills, and believe me, it took a good year or so before I even had a razor knife shaving the pill into quarter pieces just to get off of them. I would close my eyes at night, and it was like a movie. There was a movie going on. I didn't have to, it was almost entertainment, but it was a lot of scary stuff too. But eventually I was able to calm my mind, calm my nerves, and get some rest and get some good sleep. So, yeah, I went through a course for like 15 years on those meds and used meditation to get off of those.
Marty, what was it like living in your house, going into foster care? Because, you said when you talked about Donna's show that you didn't really understand these things with
right.
a mother that took that kind of a nurturing the children, because you didn't have that nurturing situation. What was
right.
it like being
right.
moved into foster
right.
care? I'd like to hear more of that.
There's many lonely nights, I tell you. There was a feeling of abandonment, when, mom and dad broke up. You have a chance to go home. I don't know if mom's punishing dad or what's going on, but I was forced to stay. So there's a feeling of abandonment, emptiness, and that lingers for years. That's all gone now that I'm older, but you're right. And thanks for bringing that up, Steve, because that was something that just lingered, oh God, for years. So yeah, I noticed that, in your son's upbringing and what Donna said, I was like, wow, I wish my mom was around to tell me that kind of stuff. But yeah, she was busy. She was a single parent, working 12-hour shifts. And that's how I got in trouble, by running the streets. So, abandonment, loneliness, and all that.
But when you talk about running the streets, I want to do that for a minute. A lot of people listening, they don't have a clue what it is when you say running the streets and so forth. They come from nice, well-adjusted, stable families. A lot of people listen to the show.
Okay, I got you.
But let me say this. A lot of people listen to the show. We got two types of people that listen to the show. We got people that are looking to change their life, but they're not sure how, and that we want to let them know that they're loved. We're there for them. Agape love, friendship, the Right Thinking Foundation, National Online Support Network, where we can be love, encourage, good friendship. That's going to help a lot of people, and they got to know that they're worthy, because that's got to be something that you came out of that with, the loneliness and abandonment. But the other piece is, we got a lot of people that would like to do more for other people that have come from a good, stable background, that might be some of the volunteers that we recruit to embrace and love and take some training so they can be a true friend to other people and give them positive things to think about. So what I'm getting at, though, in that part, though, is you said that you were doing things, running the streets, like breaking it in and stealing cars and stuff. You're an ex-juvenile. You gave that stuff the title of the show today. You gave yourself the title of that for the show. You're an ex-juvenile that made good. I know you've made good. We're going to talk about that in a little while as we get into what you did with your life. But when you were out there running the streets, can you give a little bit of what was going on in your mind that got you to do those kind of things? Yeah.
So I'm 2 or 3 generations of, hanging out on the corner. I hung out on the same corner that my dad did. And a lot of my peers that grew up, their dads hung out on the same corner too. And if it wasn't that corner, it was another corner, probably within a 3-mile or 5-mile radius. So, people think it was a gang. It was no formal gang, but it was just, that was our corner. The cops knew it. That we went to school with their kids or their uncles, and they knew that if we were on the corner, it was better for us to hang out, to be the unit. And by the way, that was our family unit, was your fellow gang members or the people hanging out on the corner with you. You did everything together. You protected your corner. Your folks lived back in the alleyways. They would come out and buy a loaf of bread or go to the bakery or the drugstore or what have you. And we were there to make sure they were protected and, whatnot. So yeah, I see where you're getting at. The kind of like the group or the gang becomes the family unit. And there's a lot of peer pressure to be in that. Otherwise, you're back in your house. You're the nerd. You're the guy that doesn't come out and get to hang out with everybody else, unless, of course, you go through the initiation and prove your worthiness and all that.
Okay. So you went to the Auberly Home for Boys.
Yeah.
And that's like a detention home?
That was the coolest place, actually. It was, that was not lockup. Juvenile court was the lockup place. This place was kind of like Auberly was a sister campus of Boys Town. And it was a kind of like, like a dorm. You had a roommate and there were supervisors. There was someone at the desk all the time on each floor. There was a curfew. You got to work part-time jobs. You got to go to a regular school. But still, again, you were a teenager on your own. You still didn't have blood parents or parents, with, that kind of upbringing.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that with us. So in your stabbing experience, that you still to this day have PTSD, non-combat type PTSD because of what happened that day in your life. You've come to mindful meditation as one way that you combat that yourself. I mean, overcome it.
Right. I have sleeping pills, but I rarely have to take them now. Doing exercise, eating well, and whatnot, and all that.
Okay. So I wanted to just go back to that section of your life a little bit because I think you've made dramatic progress. Like I said in the beginning of the show, you were going to talk on the show so that you could share how you've come from this background to doing something with your life. But you called me up and you said, you're just not ready. Right. So I think it's absolutely a wonderful thing that you are now ready to share your story to help other people. So please, everybody, whatever you're going through, others like Marty, they've overcome so much. to get to where they are today. So now, Marty, let's start talking some of the positive things that you did with your life. Now you're ready to talk about your Navy experience, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I was afraid. I want to say fear. Let me just go back to that for a second. It was anxiety, which is a part of